What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to another episode on Code with Annie. And in this episode, we're going to take a look at the concept of space complexity and auxiliary space. So while I was talking about time complexity, I missed to put a video on space complexity as well. So here goes this particular video. So without further ado, let's get started. Space complexity is nothing but the amount of memory that the algorithm takes to execute. When I say amount of memory, it refers to the memory including the input size as well. So that is called as space complexity. So if you look at this particular algorithm, which was the sort algorithm that I tried to put out, we have an input array and we iterate through the elements of the array and we compare them, and based on the comparison we sort them in ascending order, right? So we observe that the time complexity for this algorithm is O of n square because there are two for loops and we compare each element against all other elements of the array, so it's n cross n square complexity for execution. If you look at the space complexity of this algorithm, it will be nothing but O of n. Now why is it O of n? Because space complexity refers to the amount of data structures that you have instantiated in an algorithm to store the input. Okay. In this case, we have only the input array, and this input array is the one we iterate upon and perform the modifications, right? We don't have a separate array, or we don't have any other additional data structure to which we store these elements. These elements are sorted in place. So such kind of in-place sorting algorithms generally have a time complexity or space complexity of O of n. Now O of n because the array size can be n elements, right? So when you instantiate the array, you will have to allocate that much contiguous memory location so that this array can be fully processed. So you'll have an array of n elements, therefore the space taken is also O of n. Now, some people often say auxiliary space complexity or auxiliary space. So what is auxiliary space? Auxiliary space is nothing but the extra space other than the input that your algorithm uses. Okay. So we know that this array is the input to this sort method. Now, what is the other space consuming elements in this particular sorting algorithm? So if you look at it, we only see that there is one other temp variable that we use that is only for storing data temporarily, and every time it gets modified based on the for loop, but this does take one variable space, right? So generally we'll say that such kind of temp variables take O of 1 complexity. Okay, so this is called as the auxiliary space. So anything other than the input that is instantiated within your algorithm for calculation of space is called as an auxiliary space. And space complexity is a combination of both your input space plus auxiliary space. So in this case, it's going to be O of n plus O of 1, which is approximately O of n space complexity. Okay. To keep this in mind, these might be two interchangeably confusing statements, but you have to know that space complexity is equal to space taken by input plus auxiliary space. I think auxiliary, there's a spelling mistake. Yeah. So, and auxiliary space is nothing but the extra space or extra variables initialized other than the input variable in your algorithm. So that is going to be your auxiliary space. Even extra data structures will constitute an auxiliary space. Okay. Like for example, if you have another list to which you put these sorted elements, that's going to come up in the auxiliary space, and your space complexity, total space complexity, will be the extra list that you used plus the input, which is your int array of integers. Yeah. So that's it for this video. If you liked it, hit the like button, subscribe to Code with Annie if you haven't already, and if you have more doubts regarding time and space complexity, do hit me up in the comment section and I'll try to answer your questions as best as I can. So until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.